The Hermetic Door by Giuliano Kremmerz. Chapter 1. The Meeting at Villa Espa. I have been invited by a friend, a voluntary hermit in a charming country house surrounded by roses, seeking to forget in its silence and perfume a tempestuous youth in which the tragedy of his soul was consummated, accepting his hospitality for a few days. The graceful building where he welcomes me is white as snow, situated atop a hill nursed by perennial greenery. It is called Villa Espa, and this name, inscribed on two small marble plaques by the founders of that house, is half covered today by moss and ancient ivy. It can be accessed by three paths, one from the east, which disappears among thickets and underbrush of pines and palms, another from the west, simpler, among crags and hills crowned by the distant view of the maritime Alps, and a more modern one, comfortable and shaded, which leads us to the clean and elegant city of San Remo. I know that Saint Remus was murdered by Romulus, but I do not know why we have sanctified him. At any rate, the name of the legendary victim of the first king of Rome's arrogance seems to me a good omen for what is to follow. After a few days of rest in this refuge, a new guest arrived by the eastern path, a gentleman who, they said, had traveled through Asia, visiting the mysterious India, tested in Tibet, conversing for a long time with the disciples of Confucius. A man of few words, he seemed like adorable company. Very rarely curious, he smoked all day as if he were a glowing ember. A second friend arrived next, another unrepentant nomad, an Italian who had traveled through France, Germany, Switzerland, England, and then North America, and on his return, Spain, Egypt, and finally, Greece. He seemed more melancholic to me than the first. His suitcases were loaded with books, and he read and reread, as if thirsty for knowledge and erudition. A third arrived in a train carriage, a Roman, well-groomed, clean-shaven, dressed in black as if he were part of a procession accompanying a dead man to the cemetery. He gave the impression of being an extremely bored man, and he yawned like the bellows of an organ. At dinner, my friend, the magnificent lord of the house, gathered us around the table, an almost sumptuous meal, eaten in a Trappist silence. No one knew what to talk about. There were 5 of us, all men, and the most uncomfortable seemed to be the host, who elegantly served us the coffee, the black coffee, and spoke thus: "A friend to each of you, I have lived in solitude for years. The habit of being alone makes me abhor prolonged conversations. Yet I am prepared to welcome into the modest house of hope 4 friends such as yourselves. I do not believe I have ever hosted 4 members of silence. The reason for such a parsimony of words lies in the scarce knowledge each of you has of the others. No one would say that you find yourselves submerged in the same fishbowl. Allow me to make you better acquainted. K.O. Buddy has spent 20 years researching the truths of the religious East. He has traveled, he has questioned, he has seen, and he reads Sanskrit just as I read the Kabbalah of dreams. Mevio Mephisto is also searching for the secret of Faust. He is in possession of the rarest books of the Germanic Middle Ages. He has scoured London. He has fished out the most curious items in the antiquarian bookshops of Paris, and he has consulted all the sibyls, sorcerers, and priests of the fourth pages. Sempronio Cristiano knows the entire New and Old world of biblical exegesis, all the philosophical polemics of Christ, all the evangelical versions, and he yawns because of this, like a dog that barks without a voice. Finally, you, old comrade, who have turned the propaganda of magic at the end of the 19th century into the courage of a late apostle, and in Italy, no less, where no man believes in ideal apostles. Charming guests, your wise descriptions loosen the tongues of the daily diners better than 10 bottles of your angelic Nebbiolo. And once brought into the realm of the argument concerning the truth that lies concealed behind the seeker, the confessions rain down. Time lost for each of the three. They were 3 defeated men, 3 survivors of an intellectual debacle, to which they had devoted their ingenuity and all the forces of their varied culture. They were all tired and were returning from the heroic campaign to a life of apparent mediocrity, with their souls entangled in the mute sphinx, which has not yet answered the ultimate arcane word. To these 3, beneath the full moon, I spoke thus: O worthy figures of the religious and superstitious culture of the peoples, your lamenting words do not meet with indifference in the one who listens to you, and even though my esteemed hospitality may have presented me as an apostle of dead things, I am the greatest friend of the living truth. The 3 of you have taken the wrong path, for you start from a misguided preconception. That man is different today from what he was yesterday. And even worse, that East and West do not resemble each other like 2 drops of water. In the 20th century, faced with the free inquiry of positive science, you seek to evoke the India of Buddha, or the nebulous Middle Ages of the witches' Sabbath, or the theology of Catholic Christian hysteria. This is a dead world that has no living word if science does not purify it of trickery, fables, hallucinations, and dreams. Change your path and you will find the truth. I am the spirit of the time, and I speak of the search for truth in human science with the freedom that modern judgment advises. In times past, it was considered a horror to grant political rights to the people, just as the priestly castes, whether or not they possessed the knowledge of the mysterious secret that transforms man into a demigod, prohibited the profane from investigating. Today, when political power is in the hands of the most advanced peoples, every problem can be examined by anyone who, from a purely human framework, seeks to arrive at the knowledge of absolute truth. However, I openly censure those who, making a profession of positive science with criteria restricted to the mentality of ordinary life, want to analyze a world that other, uncommon senses reveal. How I detest the mystics, the poets, and the empiricists of spiritualism, who set out to build castles out of playing cards. And I say, from the perspective of Italian good sense, with that mediocre good sense that everyone possesses, that the righteous path is stripped of every sectarian proposition and must be pointed out to the investigators of truth. Charlatan philosophers and inquiring scientists of limited senses must take their place in a rational school of culture to show the way to the masses, so that it may mark the limits within which the philosopher must merge with the scientist, and the path toward the conquest of truth for the health of the people. The three of them, overwhelmed, looked at me as at a strangely shaped bird. They understood and waited for me to continue. However, the guest, the least wise among them, added, "And you? Have you not made propaganda for magic up until now?" "Yes, but explaining it as an ancient conception in relation to modernly disseminated knowledge, and because I could not baptize it with a different name, a name that does not exist, a science or group of sciences that ensures the integration of the great human powers in the modern age. I am founding this Italic integral school tonight in your Villa Esperanza, between a glass of Grignolino and a Ligurian risotto. Just as Buddha ate and Christ drank, Mephistopheles would add some other sauce to it. And thus I inaugurated it before a restricted circle of friends, to whom I present my precise ideas, without polish or declamation, or non-existent literary pretensions. I spoke to people who had already read, investigated, and searched a great deal, and who could understand me without too many subtleties of oratory art, thus sparing references to Zarathustra, which would be totally out of place. Chapter 2. Definition of Integral Science. Why were magic, divination, astrology, and alchemy called occult? There are three explanations. Occult because, in their realizations, they utilized all the human and physical forces ignored by men, publicly withheld by the representatives of all perceived wisdom. Occult because in the West they found themselves in conflict with religion, mistress of civil powers, which condemned every miraculous manifestation outside the church as heretical. Occult because those who were in possession of a truth that others ignored, whether sects or isolated men, could use and abuse it without control. Should the adjective occult endure as the attribute of these sciences? Reasonably, yes, in the first sense, because there are untaught manifestations that science does not officially explain or recognize. It is true that there is discussion about psychism, about psychic powers and psychic investigations. However, these forces are in the process of being investigated. They are not yet definitive. In the other two senses, there are no occult sciences, because to print or speak of them we need not fear an ecclesiastical tribunal condemning us, as they condemned Galileo, Giordano Bruno, Campanella, Bori, and Cagliostro. The unknown forces we can refer to in Latin terms as latent or occult. Magic, which supposedly would be classic, sounds bad to many ears that abhor the ancient, especially because the word has been abused. We can substitute it with two words that explain it. Let us call it integral science. To integrate means to take it whole or perfect. Integration is the complementary method of doing science, which is officially taught in universities, completed with the study and knowledge of the latent forces in nature and man. Thus we shall speak of the integral science of objective nature, natural magic, and human integral science, which is divine magic, because it awakens, exercises, and develops in us the attributes that ignorance until now had attributed to the gods. This is with respect to the vocabulary. Explicitly, The program of actions lies in the effort to improve ourselves and others in the knowledge of the individuality latent within us. Applying these conquests in real life, for the benefit of the less endowed, fighting evil in whatever form of ignorance and arrogance it takes. Whoever feels capable of adding their signature to this ideal program must freely consider themselves a companion of ours, in the name of the light provided by science against all religious and sectarian superstition, for this earth to which we shall return without the trumpets of the apocalypse that will sound at the awakening of the dead. They will find a great nation of brothers who bless us in the face of the sorrows that the madmen of religious forms have disseminated throughout the centuries, and the sacerdotal furies, true crimes of wicked theocracies, which they have embedded in the history of the instinctive soul that, in each of us, perpetuates the atavistic memory. I do not know if we will be few or many. I have always preferred the few of goodwill over the many of lukewarm faith when it comes time to undertake, study, or practice. The word and example of the few will transform, like the projection powder of the alchemists, 100,000 times their number. Thus Pythagoreanism spread in Magna Graecia, a precursor to ideal Christianity, neither Catholic nor Protestant. Our school, fully investigative, must not fall prey to philosophy in the sense of idle chatter, nor propitiate theologians in a realm of new babble to be reaped by the scythe of Saturn. Chapter 3. History of the Science of the Soul. This mysterious animal, proud of its wisdom and intelligence, which dominates the entire scale of beings endowed with movement upon the earth, has not yet torn the veil that covers its origins and hides the end of its journey. Until the solution to the enigma becomes public domain, there will be churches, pagodas, synagogues, and mosques. If a new direction, outside the old and cancerous carcasses of the temples, guides the masses, subjected to illiteracy, toward an ideal of fraternity and love as the safest and most natural solution for the social good, a great step will have been taken. However, let it not be thought an idle endeavor to study the sacerdotal wisdom of the most ancient peoples. The ancients were inferior in many things, but the science of the human soul took the priests to the attainment of the secret of divinity. Those who did not know the wireless telegraph, the radio, the dirigible, the automobile, or the airplane, scrutinized to the depths the soul of those subjected to the tyranny of castes, and the soul of the masses. Theocracies did not concern themselves with man, and apparently, neither with the gods. Man was the sole enemy of divine power, and state religions always sought the dominion of cunning over the ferocity of the masses. And it was true science that highlighted the danger of the permanent dominion of the few, a science still in its infancy today, because Catholic Christianity and governments have only recently renounced the industrial exclusivity of dealing with the human soul. The crimes of religious faith against the well-being of society, hindered at every step toward the knowledge of the soul, have not yet been historically conquered. It is not men who complete great revolutions. It is the injustice of prolonged arrogance that ripens them. Christianity was born revolutionary and continues as a tyrant over the human mind, and it is condemned either to return to the simple origins of faith, to transform itself, or to perish. Crystallizations belong to the mineral world, and not to that of human ideas. Political Christianity, ignorant of the science of the human soul, over which it still wants and claims to preserve the privilege, produced that conventional Middle Ages, into which it submerged the ancient, and dictated the origin of the reflowering of magical culture against the Church of Paul and Peter. Hebraicized magic, as a sign of protest by a group of schismatic Hebrews who had given a son to the terrible Jehovah, and diabolical magic in opposition to the new divinities. Thus, just as primitive Christianity absorbed the theocratic powers, forms, pomps, and rites of theocracy, magic and witchcraft perpetuated themselves in strange and fearful hieroglyphs, with the dark tenets of the science of the soul, amidst the ruins of the superstitious knowledge of ancient temples. This magic of the school, dictated by men like Arnold of Villanova, Ramon Llull, Pico della Mirandola, Bacon, Beauregard of Pisa, Giovanni Battista van Helmont, Albertus Magnus, Olaus, Avicenna, Trithemius, Paracelsus, must not be confused with the magic of hysterical pathology that led alleged practitioners of the Saturnalias of Astaroth to the stake. From that early magic of the school springs the great river of modern knowledge in every field of research. Physics, chemistry, the science of psychic forces and the phantasmal powers of men, hypnotism and suggestion as therapeutic instruments. They will yet arise in an exact knowledge of the latent powers in the human organism, as a complement to the biological sciences, and perhaps the intuition of the ultimate evolution of the species. Chapter 4. Hermetic Intelligence. Outlining a study program, and especially the program of a school in a few short pages, does not seem an easy task. But I will not be blamed for brevity. Integral science, reduced to practical magic, and the extraordinary stories and disquisitions of all those who today create poetic theologies on all musical themes regarding the possibility of an accurate science, must not delude us as a panacea of easy miracles, nor make us forget the goal of the investigations. The goal is the integration of man. Never lose sight of it. Leave devils, saints, and archangels where they are for the moment. All your experience must be focused upon man. Not upon a man, but upon yourselves, who belong to the proud representation of Olympus on earth. An economical laboratory, you carry it permanently wherever you please. Put yourselves in physical and intellectual equilibrium, with a sober life regimen, without efforts that lead you to the formation of noble ascetics. Observe in silence, in the sacred silence that separates the adept from the vanity of the word, which is not something especially difficult, so that in you the development of hermetic intelligence is fostered, the subtle and penetrating power of the human mind that brings us closer to the innate reality that strikes our human senses. So that we may understand each other in what I mean, I will plainly tell you the significance of this conquest. If you study an algebra problem and you cannot quite find the solution, Do not expect success to come outside of all premeditation and logical search. A determination of your intellect spontaneously arises, wherein resides the true path, which you will find to be true, that which is produced within you, brought forth by an intellectual light that comes from the noblest part of yourselves, and which seems, by its subtle inspiration, somewhat foreign. This is the Hermetic intelligence or light. In the schoolboy who resolves the brief matter of life in high school, in the artist, from the penetration of forms to the sense of art, in the scientist and the unlimited conquest of research. Hermes is the Greek name for the Latin Mercury. Nebo, Hermes, Mercury, Lucifer, and the Holy Spirit are synonyms of the same state of being of human intelligence, whose secret laws still remain hidden from men. All divine forms are possible if the gradual training of this luminous star of our mind is discovered behind the clouds of all our unbalancing imperfections. One can reach the state of genius like the daimon form of Socrates, of Newman as in Apollonius of Tyana, of God the Father as in the solar type of Christ. It is this intelligence that turns from light into force and gives rise to the forms of objective magic, from magnetism to the projections of psychic forces, to the different forms of mediumship, through the phenomena overseen by an incomprehensible intelligence, in which one feels the spirit of the dead, another demons, and a third the angel. The science of religions reminds you that this formless God within you awakens in silence, in the purity of the innocent. Is it true or not? Do not swear on the word of man, and let the struggle to grasp and define it be played out between yourselves and it. But remember that Christianity also was born as an infant, that is, speechless, through which symbol the child governs the world. Chapter 5. The Neutrality of the Spectator. If I study a geometry problem and perceive a reasonable answer that harmonizes two apparently contrary things, it is the penetrating judgment of Hermes. I am always myself and always one. Only one thing is proven by experience. When man is healthy in body, without cravings or desires, at peace with himself and his peers, as well as the things that surround him, he is in the fullness of his judging power. The neutrality of man facing the spectacle of the objective world brings him closer to the immutable truth of the sensory images that strike him, because the neutral appearances of the things of the world are conceived as active or negative, according to the neutral, active, or passive state of the spectator. What do I mean by neutrality? Help me with your Hermetic penetration to explain myself. Things are not subject to a change of aspect because, considered without soul or passions, they are constant by their natures in the appearance in which they are struck by our senses. If to this hypothetical immobility of their structures, man contrasts a state of conception or sensory perception without desires, without the disturbance of those very desires that must give him the idea of things, he sees and feels them as they are, as neutrally as possible, as truly conceived by him as possible. A chemist who attentively analyzes a body, with the rules and apparatus adapted to his need, is a neutral spectator, in whose hermetic mind he easily finds the manifestation of his adapted powers. A mathematician who studies and develops a calculus formula is neutral before the aspect of the lines and characters that he has drawn. As soon as the neutrality of the observer vanishes, a state of interest or participation regarding the desired result begins, and any intellectual manifestation obstructed or colored by desire is false. This is observed in thousands of examples in therapeutic medicine, when the doctor, through his cognitions, already has his ideas formed about the course of the disease. In Spiritism, in which we find ourselves more or less involved, in the majority of cases writing mediumship does not risk accumulating gossip, because the supposed mediums are not neutral, and with or without a hypnotic state or trance, they mix 99% of the lead parts of their conscious or unconscious mentality with 100th part of hermetic gold. Often poets, improvisers, or novelists are the most perfect mediums because they preserve their neutrality. Believing they are creating a form of art for enjoyment, they do not worry about what they write or sing, letting the Hermetic speak entirely. The aspect of the things that strike our senses, despite being constant in photography, in the reproduction of colors varies with the changing light. In us, there naturally exists a reproduction mechanism for the colors that vary with the changing light. In us, who naturally have a reproduction mechanism superior to the simple photographic lens, the aspect of things varies not only due to luminous differences, but also due to the moral state in which we find ourselves when things are examined. This shows us that the vision of the world in which one can read good and evil has as many different subjective aspects as there are men, and as many as there can be, within the same man, states and passional nuances. Healthy in body or sick, sleepy or cheerful, in pain or blessed, the things that surround us speak to us differently. Upon understanding the true aspect of things, the state of perfect neutrality is produced, which the perfect equilibrium of ourselves has given us. In Chapter 6, Man as a Mental Unit. Religions had their origin in the idea of bequeathing the divine types to the masses tormented by bestial passions, for their governance, and so that they might modify social life. They had theocratic origins, or were formed subsequent to the birth of theocracies. The two great living religions, theocratic or not, Christianity and Buddhism, led us to an excess of anti-scientism, spiritualism and the spirit man, which human logic repudiates. I understand that the spirit man is a seductive idea and a noble fantasy, but with this, I do not exclude that it is a scientific heresy of sacred science. All excess is an imbalance of the faculties. Let us establish some fundamental ideas to prepare ourselves. What is man? A garment of flesh and a mind that reasons, observes, and conceives ideas. We do not delve into all that philosophers and religious men have said. The Church tells us soul and body. Spiritism affirms the existence of a body, a paraspirit, and a spirit. Buddhic theosophy divides us into 7 parts. We feel ourselves to be one. We need to carry out an athletic effort to come to feel in ourselves a quid distinct from the body, which we call the mind. In Latin, mens, m abbreviated from mus and ens participle of esse. Therefore, mind for our forefathers must have meant my entity, my thinking entity, conscious entity. The psyche is the logos of the Greeks. It is not explained thus. Scientifically, an organized living body with self-nourishing and metabolic functions is a brain that has safeguarded the laboratory of ideas. Ideas know how to transport themselves through the objective world toward us by means of the five senses. The brain, the center of sensibilities, takes ideas from the sensory vehicles, processes them, and stores them. Everything added together within us turns us into cerebral gray matter, because if we did not have a brain, we would not have consciousness of ourselves. So our moral and intellective individuality starts from the brain. It is the mind. Goddess Minerva from the brain of Jupiter. Is this beautiful goddess the specific result of the ideas that reach the brain by means of sensations? Or is she independent of them and survives the physical body? Some say yes, others deny it. Do not believe either of them. There is no science that does not owe its existence to the control of experience. We can say, we know when our personal experience assures us of it. It is also not a matter of believing someone who had proven it upon their own individuality, because you could have one that survives and I might not, or the opposite. Some cite religions, suspicious sources. Priests of good faith may have dreamed, and with bad faith they will have wanted to use a funeral ceremony to keep us deceived. There is a need to read deeply only one book, one's own. These assertions should not be accepted from anyone's hands, nor placed as the basis of science. Do not argue after having studied and practiced. For now, consider yourselves as a unity. Say, one is the universal world, and one am I. If I am absorbed in a thought, I am mind. If I eat and digest, I am man. But given that one function is never independent of the rest, I am one. The man aspiring to his integration must, reasonably, develop himself in all his unities, not only feet, stomach, or nose. And this is the key to the question, upon which I demand your perspicacity. Initiation into a reintegrative science that must not be confused with the theosophies and the 12 religions that want to transform man into an angel who plays the lute before the divine throne, but which aspires more modestly for the intelligent beast man to develop to the purity of his powers, sovereign of his destiny and free, and just lord of the latent and known forces that nature has given him. If a system of medicine wanted to reduce the entire human organism to the excessive development of nervous sensitivity, it would not create a healthy body. Thus, the religious hypothesis has resulted in so many subjects of the asylum who were then sanctified out of admiration for neuropathies of all forms in the history of faith. I understand that they were mad gods, generous and truly heroic for their social actions in difficult times, but there were as many thousands who were refined delinquents of theology, who brought dishonor not only to paradise, but to humanity. Julian the Apostate, who was initiated into the truths, could not conceive that the integral and exuberant paganism of Roman initiation should be replaced by an anti-magical heresy, which prepared for death and not for life, and which was called Christianity under the protection of a symbol of death. The human mind must dispose of the physical body and not allow itself to be subjugated by it, without objection and by fatality, given that the first power developed by the mentality is that of directing the forces that prevaricated. This, the current state of social civilization, already gives to the best educated, because practical education is that which does not let itself be dragged away by the arrogance of instincts. But you, men of life and sagacity, do not believe that whoever appears thus is thus. Today, education, rather than a real predominance of the mind over the body, is of hypocrisy, which skillfully hides the depravity of the men who appear most strongly armed in the struggle. On the contrary, for the man who wants to evolve from the animal state to the integral state, the inhibitory power of the mind over the senses must be real, not apparent. He who, on the contrary, makes himself the dominator of the senses, to halt their functions to the point that the day he wishes to make use of them he finds them atrophied, is simply an unhappy neurotic. See from here the abyss that separates the two things, magic and religion. The ascetic is the initiate who strips himself of the need to love. The first feels incapable, the second is voluntarily abstemious. Chapter 7. Rules of Temperance and Conduct. No formulas. My friends, science is also temperance of words. Do you want to get along well? Be of temperate thoughts, sober in actions. Consider your equal as flesh of your flesh. Charity comes from caro, which is flesh. Master your senses, and do not let them gain the advantage over your reason. Make use of things in proportion to your power in their use. Do not reach satiety in anything you desire. Do not prefer to seem and not to be. Be for yourself. Do not covet that which belongs to others out of vanity and self-interest. Aspire to and seek to possess the conscience that would make you better and would be useful to others. Repudiate all that places you above the mediocrities amidst which you live, so that others do not perceive it as a living injustice. Do not consider work as a punishment, but as your contribution to the life of your equals in society. Read the golden verses of Pythagoras, and you will find the advanced gentlemen of our times. So do not ask excessively if everything comes down to this. Peace be with you. For peace to have a place within you, it must happen that you are physically healthy and balanced in your mind, adaptable or adapted to the environment in which you live. Not everyone can choose the environment of our life of peace. The struggle for existence, voluntary errors, the necessities imposed on us by the great society in which we live, often oppress us. Not having known or been able to choose the environment of peace, not being able to or not knowing how to renounce it because our errors must be expiated one by one, implies the necessity of acting upon it to modify it with patience, example, and tenacity. The most active means to render harmless the environment in which one lives with displeasure is to separate it mentally. Anything that you possess can distance you, poison you, or hurt you, even your thoughts if you are not attentive. Separating it mentally, as something that neither must nor can offend you, and feeling yourselves endowed with the mission of tolerating those who are inferior or bothersome to compel them not to disturb your tranquility, you have conquered and produced a good. The magi of tradition, when they want to preserve their integrity against spirits and creatures of evil, enclose themselves in a circle that they draw with a sword. With your person surrounded by ideal circles, with an olive branch, say, the unjust shall not manage to shatter my equilibrium. If you, instead of being as you are now, have reached the first steps in the practice of this sublime art of ours, you will know that Hermes shall tell you the word that calms the dogs that bark and shatter the sleep of the just, and gives you the power not to hear them bark. In physical life, use everything and abstain from everything at will. No excess. In moral life, endure the annoying animals that surround you and the daily annoyances. Be patient. Learn to put a muzzle on the former and to protect yourselves from the latter. Never be unjust and, forgetting that you are nourished by the Christianity that has made us justify so many lies, learn to always be sincere with yourselves. Whoever tells the truth to himself will feel the truth of others. Remember that it is in our laboratory where we must see ourselves as clearly as in the sunlight. Being sincere with oneself is a complicated task. If we manage to strip ourselves of passions, we draw closer to the truth. With the passions that torment us, it is useless to reflect upon ourselves. With a sober regimen of life without excesses, the body is fortified. If you feel ill, fast. Turn this regimen against passions and desires. Passions are sufferings for desires not achieved or not fully satisfied. Desire soberly, and when the desire exceeds itself, abstain. This gymnastics makes you masters of yourselves. Thus you will be able to conquer the habit of sincerity and say to yourselves, I am a weak man and I must correct myself, or I am a sluggard and I must be diligent, or I feel like a satyr and I want to become a man. This last example indicates to you that which most distances us from the integration of human powers, the worst sin, the desire of lust, the concupiscence of sexual possession, which makes civil man descend to the level of baboons. Then you will ask me, is it necessary to be of the school of Saint Anthony the Abbot and chaste as anchorites? No, my dear friends, it is necessary to never prostitute oneself, because man and woman prostitute themselves and descend from the human pedestal when they give themselves for the flesh. It is like the vice of the precipice. The need to live must provide us with the bait that we crave, but with the need already satisfied. If we eat merely to feel the taste of the viands, we are swine with a human appearance. Analogously, it is the prostitution of man, in whom it is not the supposedly physical appetite that must determine a satisfaction of the instincts. Let an impure desire never disturb your flesh, and always consider impure every sexual desire in which the breath of the heaviest matter calls you to the sacrifice of your dignity as a man or woman. Consider concupiscence not as Catholic Christians, but as the most evolved men. One of the most aristocratic things in human life is the total giving of oneself, in a moment of oblivion to the universe, because in that moment the whole universe shines and vibrates within us. It is aristocratic and divine when a true, deep, and intense love is understanding, is light and the manifestation of a world hidden from the eyes of beasts, and which demands of us the sacrifice of the act in the nobility of thought and image. It is the filthiest of things when true and immense love is absent, and the lasciviousness of idleness and blood mires us in mud. Understand me and separate yourselves from the religious forms that have never understood this. The sacrament of marriage is prostituted when the priest blesses a couple that unites without love. Blessed by all the noumena of the Olympian heaven is every aristocratic holocaust in which man does not forget that he is the living and lived God. The Hebrew law says, "Do not fornicate," the Church of Christ says. "Do not fornicate," who will explain it as clearly and precisely as I have done. Then understand me and understand yourselves. And I conclude. A normal man, not paranoid, not neurotic, healthy of heart, without incipient arteriosclerosis, of good digestion, without rheumatism, not scrofulous nor free from any origin of syphilis, capable of enduring 8 hours of work, intellectual in relation to the social functions he fulfills in life, is a perfect type of animal man, civilized or less. To be a man aspiring to ideal integrality, which is the knowledge of the latent forces within us, of the laws of harmony bequeathed to us by universal nature in its forces, whether ignored or ill-defined, the conscious use of the forces and production of intelligent phenomena outside and within us, mastery of all forms of manifestation of the Hermetic or Luciferian which manifests in us in a normal and continuous way, requires that the mind absolutely dominate the animal and dictate its tastes. In this sense, there is an absolute need to distance oneself from religious forms in which the mental and moral entity of man tries to free itself from the tyranny of the physical body, to realize a hypothetical monstrosity of a spirit man without a heavy material body. Chapter 8. Foundations of the Italic School. We are taking up the arguments of the first conversations. Then doubts, observations, and brief criticisms will rain down. Whoever returns from intellectual defeats is fearful of falling into the trap. Does he believe that with so little one reaches the miracle? And I no longer believe in printed books and in things done by the herd. But we would like the Master to teach us and call bread, bread, and milk, milk. And then what would happen next? Would this guarantee that we find ourselves in good company? It seems little. It is true all that I have said. It seems little to cultured men and very little to the uncultured. But the error is to consider the integration of human powers, the divinization of the man-beast, as a comfortable placement on the state railways or in the posts of the kingdom. Comical pretensions in the mouths of people who have studied notable forms of knowledge, aspirations of cretins who have never opened a book. Complete within yourselves the real picture of the highly elevated goal you propose for yourselves, or do not harbor the desire to be laughed at to your face. Devote yourselves more to psychic studies in the experimental common sense, assisted and verified with mediums. Observe well, discuss. Fight with the leg of a chair and the creaking of a table. But do not speak, do not desire, do not aspire to speak of magic, of integrations, nor of perfection. An elevated matter among the elevated. It is represented in the sacred Kabbalah of the crown of Solomon and Zoroaster, which seem to be confused with those gilded drawings that actors place upon the head of Saul when reciting the tragedy of Ophiri. The school that we found here in Italy as essentially Latin must have as a minimum measure the maximum of good sense. The others have given us nothing. I will give you a very great virtue as a guide, that of reducing things to normal dimensions and not desiring the impossible, as well as not pretending to become overnight a circus freak. The just mastery of oneself, of equilibrium disinterest, the elevation of feelings, keeping silent, will not make you mutate from apes into gods of Olympus, to whom everything is permissible without knowing that the gods cannot do everything. Evoked with the ancient rituals, if you know them, a genie like those of the 1,001 Nights will appear to tell you, everything that is in accordance with what you ask is in my power. This is a teaching worth a treasure. Not even genies with 100 wings and thousands of eyes can do everything. Philales, in chapter 10 of his Introitus, writes of the sulfur that is in sophistical mercury. It is enough to understand that you will obtain things in proportion to what you have in your pocket, which is why some highly excellent youths are hopeless in the study of mathematics or languages, and choose professions that do not adapt to their faculties. Thus, one cannot expect, that everyone can reach very distant ports. The sea of the unknown is immense. There are those who travel at transatlantic speeds, those on sailing ships making do with the gusts, those who go on little fishing boats, and those who go on rafts. Pivano Arlato would say, "The Lord gives according to your strength." I will say, you will obtain according to your worth. Since it is important, above all, that the Hermeticist manifests himself, the light of the Hermeticist will lead to integration, because you will begin to see the outer and inner world in a way, and with a different feeling, from that which you yourselves saw yesterday. I have said that ours must be an integral school, not a sect, church, or synagogue with a pulpit. A school is a method of investigation. It is education, an independent training superior to all the fabulous worlds of religion and the brotherhoods dependent upon it. Learning to see the true face of things under the ray of a new light, as it is not conceived by ordinary philosophers, the indifferent, or the materialists, outside of all the heavens made by the masses, outside the Christian paradise and the Vedic labyrinth. This is a first great miracle of transmutation. An italic school that recalls the integral abstractions of Pythagoras with the values of numbers, abstractions of absolute values independent of any mystical form. Then the Master appears before you, above you, and in front of you. It is the unknown Master, or the unknown spirit of Martinist theosophy. and perhaps a little bit of the high masters of Tibet, of the fashionable neo-Buddhist theosophy. The integral Hermetic Italic school must have the character of impersonality and of non-belief in the word of the teacher. I could tell you, like Irenaeus, that I know what I write.
Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.